Lecture 5, Elasticity. The basic idea is elasticity measures how much one variable responds to changes in another. Elasticity is a measure of the responsiveness of quantity demanded or quantity supplied to one of its determinants. I'd have to say the easiest way of thinking about elasticity is thinking about how much will each consumer respond when the price changes. Here we'll look at goods from one extreme to another. For example, if we think about a good like toilet paper, if the price doubles, do you guys think that the number of consumers willing to purchase toilet paper will decrease drastically? The answer is probably no. So let's look at a bunch of different examples. First, how do we measure price elasticity of demand? Price elasticity of demand measures how much quantity demanded responds to a change in the price of the good. Remember, this is the movement along the given demand curve, right? Your downward sloping demand curve. A price change is simply going from P1 to P2, and we basically are trying to measure how much quantity demanded will decrease as a result of that price change. So if the price goes up, how much does quantity demanded decrease? If the price goes down, how much does quantity demanded increase? Again, the response of the consumers is very much tied to the type of product. So here we're really loosely speaking about price sensitivity of the buyer's demand. The way we measure it in an equation form is we look at the percentage change in quantity demanded, and we'll give you guys a formula for that, and we divide that by the change in the percentage change in the price. What determines the price elasticity of demand? The first determinant is the availability of close substitutes. The second is whether the good is a necessity or a luxury. Third is the definition of the market. How is the market defined? And this is almost in terms of scope of the market. Fourth is the time horizon. Is this a short run or long run? And finally, the share of the budget spent on the good. The next series of examples will go through each one of these 5 determinants where we'll look at a set of 2 goods and we'll try to determine where the quantity demanded change will be greater as a result of the change in price. Example 1, substitutes or availability of substitutes. So we're looking at 2 goods, breakfast cereal versus toilet paper. Let's pretend where the price of both of these goods go up. Well, let's think about breakfast cereal. There's many close substitutes. Think about all the different things you can substitute for breakfast cereal. Pancakes, Eggo waffles, bagels, etc. Or realistically, any type of food. So buyers can easily switch if prices rise. Now, toilet paper has no close substitutes, so consumers would probably not buy less of it even if the price rises. So here we notice that when you see the existence of more substitutes, consumers will react more to the change in the price. So price elasticity is higher, or consumers are more responsive when there's close substitutes available. So let's look at the second example. Example 2, necessities versus luxuries. So here we're going to compare insulin versus a Chanel handbag. Again, let's imagine a world where both of these goods rise, and we want to think about for which good does the quantity demanded drop the most and why. Okay, insulin. Insulin, if you have diabetes, right, this is your lifesaver. This keeps you alive. So a rise in its price would cause little or no decrease in the quantity demanded for insulin. Now, as you might have seen in the news over the last couple of years, there's been a few of these life-saving drugs where prices had increased substantially as a result of some greedy behavior. And we know that consumers cannot really change their behavior. There was quite a few disturbing stories about people rationing their insulin, and that had caused quite a bevy of health problems. Now, when we think about a Chanel handbag, this is a luxury good. Okay, this becomes very elastic. And basically, as prices of this good rise, many people will forgo it. We know evidence of this exists during recessionary periods because typically when a recession begins, the first goods that consumers really stop their consumption of is luxury items. So what's our lesson here? Price elasticity is higher for luxuries than for necessities, meaning consumers respond more, right? They change their behavior by more units of quantity demanded if the good is a luxury than for a necessity. Definition of the market: jeans versus clothing. So again, let's imagine where both of the prices rise for these goods. We want to think about which good does the quantity demanded drop the most. For narrowly defined markets, so very narrowly defined markets, such as jeans, there's many substitutes. Now, basically, when we say many substitutes, we're talking about something very specific, say like a pair of Levi's, right? Really, any other brand of jeans would be a substitute. And if those prices didn't rise, consumers would switch to those. If we're talking about just jeans in general, we can think of khakis, shorts, slacks, skirts, dresses, etc. There's many substitutes. Therefore, quantity demanded will drop by a lot if the price of jeans goes up. Now, if you have a good that's broadly defined, then these types of goods, specifically clothing, right, I don't see a substitute for clothing. So if the price of all clothing goes up, right, we're very unlikely to choose something else to wear, right? Unless you're going to move into a nudist colony or wear plants, you really do need to buy clothing. So, lesson here: price elasticity is higher, or consumers are more elastic for narrowly defined goods rather than broadly defined ones. Time horizon. Let's think of the gasoline in the short run versus the long run. The price of gasoline goes up. Does quantity demanded drop more in the short run or the long run, and why? Well, first, let's think about what could you do tomorrow. Let's say the price of gasoline tripled, and you woke up tomorrow and it was 3 times what it is today. What do you do? Well, it's a good thing not many of us are driving very much right now, and therefore that's not going to affect us tremendously. But say 6 months ago, this would have extremely impacted people. So what can you do in the short run? Well, you can ride the bus, do carpool, etc. in order to reduce the costs. But there's not much we can do, so most of us are going to pay the higher price of gasoline. Versus the long run. What can we do in the long run? If we foresee the price increase in gasoline to be prolonged, people may switch to smaller cars. They may decide to live closer to where they work, etc. So price elasticity is higher in the long run than it is in the short run, which means we have a lot more time and space in order to adjust our behavior when we're thinking about something, for the next 6 months to a year, rather than something happening immediately, right? Like prices changing immediately. Example 5, the share of the budget spent on the good. Okay, so let's think of this a little bit differently. Let's think of this story as a 10% price cut. So let's start with a $1 candy bar, which is still a fairly high price for a candy bar. And let's say there's a big sale that week at the supermarket where all the candy is 10% off. Are people going to respond in some kind of massive way? And the answer is, of course, no, they're not, right? You won't even flinch an eye at the fact that there's a 10% cut in the price of a candy bar, right? Because all it does is it saves you 10 cents. What about if we're talking about a 10% drop in the price of a $1,000 TV? Well, this allows you a savings of $100 if you were going to be purchasing the television, so this would induce you to buy more. So inexpensive goods are more inelastic, which means we don't really change our behavior very much, than expensive goods. So with expensive goods, price changes will elicit substantive response because they represent a larger share of our budget. So there's going to be a variety of demand curves we're going to be looking at in terms of elasticity. We know demand is effectively downward sloping, except in 2 cases that I'll show you here. We're going to be looking at several types of demand curves, and we'll do examples of each. We'll start off with a perfectly inelastic demand curve. Perfectly inelastic demand. So this is a situation that occurs when the price change has no impact on the number of units that are consumed or the quantity demanded. So in this case, this causes a unique scenario where there is absolutely no responsiveness to the change in price, and therefore you end up with this vertical demand curve, basically saying, theoretically, even if the price goes up or down by very, very large amounts, there's actually no change in quantity demanded. So this is a case where the price elasticity demand is equal to 0, once again, stating that there is no change in quantity demanded. An example of this, again, would be insulin. I'd say another really good example of this would be behavior of addicts when it comes to illegal drugs. Inelastic demand simply means that the change in price, the percentage change in price, is greater than the percentage change in quantity demanded. Basically saying that the price goes up by 10%, the quantity demanded is going to change less than 10%. So in these cases, the price elasticity of demand is less than 1. So here the demand curve is very relatively steep. I'll draw this out later on an iPad video so you guys can see the comparison. Consumers' price sensitivity is fairly low. We can think of this as a good like toilet paper, for example. Cigarettes also follow a similar type of inelastic procedure. So again, price elasticity of demand is less than 1. Unit elastic is a situation where the percentage change in price is exactly equal to the percentage change in quantity demanded, generating elasticity equal to 1. So basically, this is a type of good where as the price comes down a certain amount, the quantity demanded responds exactly the same way. So this is a unique case where the elasticity is equal to 1. A good is elastic when the percentage change in quantity demanded is greater than the percentage change in price. So in this case, if there's a small price change, you see the quantity demanded respond by a lot. So the more easy it is to replace an item or substitute it, you tend to see this type of event take place. So consumers are very sensitive to the change in price in this case, and the demand curve becomes relatively flat. Perfectly elastic. So this is a situation where a percentage change in any percentage change in price causes an infinite percentage change in quantity demanded. So this is extreme price sensitivity. It's like saying if the price of a pencil went up by a penny, you wouldn't buy any pencils, right? This is an extreme situation. So price changes by 0 and quantity can change by any amount. Calculating a percentage change. So the way we calculate a percentage change is by taking the end value minus the start value divided by the start value. Another way of thinking about this is the new value minus the old value divided by the old and multiplying that by 100. In this case, you can see the change in price is the price. So here's the equation for the price elasticity of demanded. Percentage change in quantity demanded divided by the percentage change in price. Let's have a look at this example. So here we have the price elasticity of demand for hotel rooms. And what we're assuming here is that hotel room prices decreased from $90 to $70. And as a result, quantity demanded increased from 3,000 to 5,000 units. The next slide will show us a video for the solution. Elasticity and the linear demand curve. So what we've been looking at initially is thinking about the slope of the demand curve in terms of what the elasticity is. But it turns out even in a linear demand curve that has a singular slope, the price elasticity of demand will vary based on where you are along the demand curve. So for example, when you're looking at a price change from $30 to $20 and 0 units to 20 units, we find that the elasticity is equal, which basically is very, very elastic. When we then go from the price change from $20 to 10 and the quantity demanded change from 20 to 40, we get an elasticity equal to 1, or unit elastic. And then in the bottom portion of the demand curve, the price change is 200% and the price change is 40%, and we get an elasticity of 0.2. So the demand curve is elastic in the upper portion above the unit elastic region, which is the midpoint of the demand curve. So this midpoint is equal to a unit elastic point of the demand curve. So really any price above this is the elastic region, and any price below is the inelastic region. The next slide will give us a video about total revenue as a pricing strategy. Combining price elasticity and total revenue. So as we saw in the previous video, revenue is equal to the price of the good times the number of units that you sell. Now, if the demand is elastic, or in the upper portion of the demand curve, right, in the top portion of the demand curve, price elasticity of demand is greater than 1. So the percentage change in quantity demanded is greater than the percentage change in price. Now notice something. Here we have a total revenue curve. The total revenue is derived from every single point where we multiply price times quantity. So notice if we're looking at a price like right here, right, let's say it's $50. If the quantity demanded at that price is 0, then the total revenue will be 0. If we're looking at a price of 0, say even the quantity demanded is, 50, for example, what will happen is the total revenue will be 0. Now, the elasticity, the demand curve, or the midpoint of the demand curve, actually exists to show us the maximum total revenue point. So the midpoint of the demand curve, if you find the midpoint, that'll actually tell us the price and quantity to maximize revenue. Now that is a specific type of strategy for a firm, and specifically it's for a firm that wants to increase the number of buyers or users of the specific product. It's not the same as a firm trying to maximize their profit. It is in fact not at all the same type of strategy. Now if we're in the bottom region of the demand curve, so down here we have the inelastic portion, and in the inelastic portion the percentage change in quantity demanded is less than the percentage change in price. So let's see what happens here. So if we're a monopolist and we can set a price, if we're in the inelastic portion of the demand curve, how do we get more revenue? Which means how do we get more movement up this curve? And the way to do that, as you can see here, is to increase the price. So if you're in the inelastic portion of the demand curve, the way you get more revenue is by increasing the price. Now, when you are operating in the elastic portion of the demand curve, then the way you increase your revenue is by lowering the price. So for elastic, you lower the price to get more revenue. For inelastic, you increase the price. And the reason is, when consumers are inelastic, that means they're not really responding much to a percentage change in the price, and therefore you can charge them higher prices. Easy question here. A store manager decides to lower the price of a featured sandwich from $3 to $2, and she finds that during the week increased from 240 to 480 sandwiches. That's the change in quantity demanded. Is demand elastic? So first we have to find the percentage change in quantity demanded. Okay, so our new value is 480, old value is 240, divided by 240, and that gives us a change of equal to 1. The price change is from $3 to $2, which is a change of 1 over 3, or 33% reduction in the price. What does that mean? It means that the price change was, the price elasticity of demand for sandwiches was 3, which means demand is in fact very, very elastic. Elasticity examples. These are calculations from real actual goods. What are goods that are inelastic, which means consumers are not very responsive? Eggs is one of the lowest price elasticities of demand because there's really not very many substitutes for eggs. Food, right, as a general category. Healthcare services, gasoline in the short run, gasoline in the long run, and highway, bridges, and tolls. I want you guys to look at this healthcare issue. Right, notice what this is saying. This is saying even when healthcare costs go up, consumers are not responding very much to that change in that price. Unit elastic, so the percentage change in price is equal to the percentage change in quantity demanded. We have two goods here in this category, shellfish and cars. Elastic goods would be luxury cars, where you have a very big change in quantity demanded as a result of change in price. foreign air travel, and restaurant meals tend to be highly elastic goods. This calculation also helps us decide whether goods are normal goods or inferior goods, which we'll do in a later slide. So please come back for part 2 of this lecture on the price elasticity of supply.